guys, I can hear gunshots. Oh my god. Oh, right behind Resorts World. And you can see the smoke and there's gunshots and people are shooting at each other. Oh god.
Pasay, Metro Manila in the Philippines. Today's video is centred around Resorts World Manila, which opened in 2009. An integrated resort licensed by the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation. Inside it holds 7 hotels, a huge casino operating over 3 floors, theatres, bars, clubs and restaurants. This case begins in the afternoon of June 1st, 2017. 42-year-old Jessie Javier Carlos was a former tax specialist with the Department of Finance. He and his wife, his high school sweetheart Jen, lived on 1663 Felix Huertas Street with their 3 children. The Carlos family were described as pleasant, polite, their children were well-mannered and well-behaved, and Jessie and Jen were a quiet couple that kept to themselves. Jessie Carlos had come from very little. His mother Teodora used to make and sell baked goods on her knees for hours just to send her children to school. When Jessie was a young boy, his family spent several years fighting eviction notices. As he got older, he started working odd jobs until he decided to study custom brokerage. His cousin said that although Jessie wasn't the sort of person to get awards in school, he was determined to do well, and before long, Jessie Carlos found himself working for the Department of Finance. Between the years of 2000 and 2010, his wealth had seemingly grown by a substantial amount. The family had a personal driver that drove the children to private schools each day, and a rotating series of nice cars were parked outside the home. As well as presents every Christmas, Jessie would give envelopes lined with 1,000 pesos for each of his relatives. However, no one in the neighbourhood really knew how Jessie Carlos made his money. Carlos would eventually find himself let go from the Department of Finance for misdeclaring his statement of assets, liabilities and net worth. At the time of his employment, he was making around 15,000 pesos a month, but had declared assets of more than 9 million pesos. In 2012, the Office of the Ombudsman found him unable to reasonably explain the huge disparity between his income and his properties. Following this, he was dismissed in 2014. His retirement benefits were forfeited as a result, and he was disqualified for any post in government service. This is when people in the neighbourhood said everything started to change for the Carlos family. The cars slowly started disappearing, the private driver stopped receiving calls to come to work, and it was rumoured that Jessie and Jen wanted to sell their house. It was no secret that Jessie Carlos was a gambling addict. He was a high roller, usually placing a minimum bet of 40,000 pesos. He had been banned from several casinos at the request of his family, and this had also led to his wife Jen eventually separating from him. Jessie Carlos was around 4 million pesos in debt with the banks alone. He was continuing to sell various assets to fund his ever-growing gambling habits. One of his neighbours, Cecilia, had a son that grew up with Jessie. She said Jessie began gambling and betting early on, playing caracross in the street with the boys, and later started cockfighting, betting vast amounts of money on this too. On June 1st, Jessie Carlos attended a hearing that involved the government's attempts to seize 6 million pesos worth of his assets. He tried to settle the case for 1.2 million, but the government rejected the offer. At around 4 p.m. on June 1st, 3 men entered Resorts World Manila. Elmer Mitra Jr., Alvin Cruzin, and also Jessie Javier Carlos. They stayed for a couple of hours and had coffee at the Maxim Hotel before leaving and getting into a grey BMW. As the evening rolled around and the nightlife of Resorts World Manila kicked in, Elmer Mitra Jr., Alvin Cruzin and Jessie Javier Carlos were still driving around talking. Elmer Mitra Jr. worked at the Philippine National Construction Corporation and was also a lawyer. Alvin Cruzin was a retired police officer and was now working as a casino financier. The conversations that took place in the car that night can never be known, but people speculated that Jessie Carlos may have been getting pressured by Elmer and Alvin to repay his debts. Just before 10 p.m, Carlos pulled a gun out and shot Elmer. Witnesses described hearing more gunshots from inside the car before the car crashed and overturned. Carlos crawled out from the back seat and stumbled off into the night. When police arrived on scene, they recovered 4 9mm casings, 6 bullets and a 9mm pistol in the car. Both Elmer and Alvin were dead from gunshot wounds to the heads. As officers were dealing with the crash and shooting, just before 11 p.m, Jessie Carlos returned home. He changed his clothes and left his house again, heading for the casino in Resorts World Manila. At 11:19, he stopped at a local refueling station where he bought 3 litres of gasoline. At 12:07 a.m, Carlos arrived at the entertainment complex by taxi. He was wearing plain black clothes and carrying a large bag. He exited the taxi, limping slightly as he did so. Unbeknownst to anyone around, inside his bag was a rifle and the container of gasoline. He got in an elevator with 2 women and headed to the parking areas, getting out on the 2nd floor. As he left the elevator, he put on a mask and an ammunition vest. He promptly walked into the casino, avoiding the metal detectors and the security guard, took out his rifle and started shooting. Everyone started running for their lives. Security did their best to contain the situation and started trying to evacuate more than 12,000 people from the complex, but the fear and panic proved too much. Stampedes of people crammed into the exits, with some even jumping out of windows. Many people crowded into various cupboards and rooms around the casino, barricading themselves in. At this time, it was unclear how many shooters there were because of the amount of shots that were being fired. Some guests recalled hearing the word terrorists being shouted throughout the building, causing even more panic and uncertainty. In one of the rooms, Carlos took out the gasoline, poured it over one of the gambling tables, and set it alight. Before throwing his bag containing the ammunition into the flames. He continued moving around the area, setting it on fire as he went. Carlos then entered one of the rooms containing the safes. He shot at the locks on the door before gaining entry to the room with the casino chips in. He spent some time stuffing casino chips into a bag. These chips totaled at just over 113 million pesos, which was the equivalent of just over $2 million at the time. At 1:30 a.m, the building's security and armed police were inside the resort looking for the shooter or shooters, as it remained unclear how many perpetrators there were. Fear was spreading rapidly, and it wasn't long before the main gates of the 4 terminals at the international airport shut, and only passengers and airport personnel already inside were able to move around. Carlos was now wandering around, slowly and aimlessly, seemingly unclear as to where to go and what to do next. Suddenly, a security personnel looked behind a door and saw Carlos. He quickly backed off before attempting to shoot him. They both fired at each other for a few seconds, and Carlos was hit in the process. He then shut the door and slowly headed up the stairs.
Oh my god, you guys, I can hear gunshots. Oh my god. Dude, right behind Resorts World. And you can see the smoke and there's gunshots and people are shooting at each other.
He entered the Maxim Hotel in the resort, shooting as he went. At 1:46 a.m, he shot into room number 510. He grabbed some towels and set them on fire outside in the hallway. Before entering the room himself. Before long, police and security cautiously entered the hallway before approaching room 510. Inside the room on the bed was the body of Jessie Javier Carlos. He had covered himself with a thick blanket before setting himself on fire and shooting himself in the head. He was burned beyond any recognition.
Gunfire and explosions at a resort in the Philippines that is popular with tourists. The frightening scene playing out over the last few hours at the Resorts World complex in the capital city of Manila, which is right near the city's airport.
And we have been seeing images showing people injured, but in the last hour, a police chief said there are no confirmed reports of gunshot wounds. Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan is in the newsroom now with the latest. Jim?
Gunfire and explosions rocked the Pasay City section of Manila today. Guests scrambling to safety, some leaping from windows to escape, and that may be where the injuries are. There are tonight conflicting reports of just how serious this attack was, and early reports from the Red Cross of scores injured may well be exaggerated, as the real scope of the attack is only now unfolding. Police say they're not sure what exactly happened, but they say one gunman is still out there.
People were gathered outside of the burning building, waiting for news of their loved ones who were trapped inside. It was a truly terrifying and heart-wrenching ordeal for the community. It was confirmed that nobody died from a gunshot, aside from Carlos himself, but the fires he had set had spread quickly, and tragically, many people had suffocated to death inside the building. A few people also died when a ceiling collapsed on them.
Learned overnight that a brazen attack on a casino in the Philippines killed at least 37 people. A heavily armed gunman opened fire inside and set gaming tables on fire. More than 70 were hurt, and it happened.
The number of people that lost their lives that day totaled 38, including Carlos. A further 70 people were left injured due to the stampedes when leaving the building. Police speculate that when Carlos threw his bag of ammunition onto the burning casino table, this only added to the idea that there was more than one shooter in the building, and amplified people's fears about leaving the rooms they had barricaded themselves into. And tragically, this meant they had suffocated to death as a result.
Tonight, ISIS is claiming responsibility. The jihadist group already active in the Philippines, clashing with the military in the south.
All the initial suspicions pointed towards an act of terror, with affiliates of Daesh, known more commonly as ISIS, claiming responsibility for the attack. But representatives of the Philippine National Police consistently maintained that the motive was likely a robbery. The shooter was working alone, and it was not a terrorist attack.
Battling ISIS-affiliated groups in the south of the country for the past 2 weeks, but are not calling this attack an act of terror.
There are no indications of terrorist activity. All indications point to a criminal act by an apparently emotionally disturbed individual.
But as far as the police is concerned,
we could not declare this as a terror-related act, terror-related incident, because he did not intentionally hurt anyone. There's no indication that he shot people or caused an explosion.
Steve Cutler, chairman of the Overseas Security Advisory Council, also agreed the incident was a robbery and not an act of terrorism. However, the Speaker of the Philippine House of Representatives disagreed with the police and hinted at the possibility of it being a lone wolf terrorist attack. Soon after the incident, Philippine National Police Director General Ronald De La Rosa issued a statement in which he described the attack as being perpetrated by a single shooter, refuting any prior eyewitnesses' statements that believed there was more than one person involved. Rumours and speculation were still running rife, and the shooter's identity was still unknown to the police and public. But an autopsy was carried out, as well as using samples of blood that had been left around the casino. And with this, Jessie Javier Carlos' identity was finally revealed.
Okay, let's do this fast dahil si Mrs. is suffering from anxiety since the time that she saw the footages, the news. Good morning, everyone. First, let us observe a moment of silence to pray for those who passed away in the Resorts World incident. Today, after relentless effort of our operatives to identify the lone gunman of the tragic incident at the Resorts World Manila, after backtracking, we have finally established the identity of the perpetrator. At 5:30 a.m. this morning, members of his family arrived and sat down with our SITG investigators after thorough review of details, photos, CCTVs. The family confirmed the identity of the perpetrator to be Mr. Jessie Carlos, Filipino, 43 years old, separated and a former employee of the Department of Finance. And this one also shows Jessie in one casino, no? Dito sa Metro Manila. So he's been frequenting one casino dito sa Metro Manila. Hindi lang natin sasabihin kung saan. So dito.
Later that month, the senior inspector of the Manila Police District Homicide Division also confirmed that Carlos was the only person of interest in the shooting of Elmer Mitra Jr. and Alvin Cruzan. This followed forensic testing that was done on the car. Clothing found around Carlos's house also matched the clothes he was seen wearing after the crash in various bits of CCTV footage. On the 7th of June, the House of Representatives Committee on Public Order and Safety and the Committee on Games and Amusement started an investigation into the tragic events. The management of Resorts World Manila admitted there was a lapse in security on that day, and the casino's CEO said upon reviewing the CCTV footage, they realised that some security personnel were not in their assigned areas when Carlos entered the casino. Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, also known as PAGCOR, regulates casinos and issues the licences and authority for casinos to operate. On June 9th, they suspended the operating licence of Resorts World Manila until it deemed that it had rectified its serious security lapses and deficiencies. Armin Gomez, the head of security for Resorts World Manila, saw his credentials severely scrutinised. It came to light that he only had a short stint in training, despite him previously stating he had 10 years of experience as a security practitioner. The House Majority Leader, Rodolfo Fariñas, said that the casino's personnel should have been adequately trained. At the time of the attack, Gomez was already on his way home. It came to light that management of the resort were given a heads up to boost their security a matter of days before the attack happened, but for some reason this wasn't followed up on. Senators urged establishments, particularly tourism facilities, to tighten up on security, and in response to the attack, police also increased their presence in shopping centres in Metro Manila. The chief operating officer of Resorts World Manila said the company was going to give 1 million pesos to each of the families of those who died in the attack.
A very difficult time for all of us here in Resorts World Manila. We consider our guests, our patrons, and our employees as our true family.
The licence suspension that had been imposed by PAGCOR was lifted on June 29th, and Resorts World Manila resumed its gambling operations. The casino also hired a private security consultant to tighten up their security procedures. It's been reported that the gambling area on the second floor that was affected by the attack will be converted to be part of the shopping mall. Although robbery seemed like the only motive, the true reasoning behind Jessie Carlos's actions that night can never be fully known. Jessie's cousin has his own theory. He wonders if maybe, even though Jessie knew he couldn't cash the chips in, he took them anyway, so that he could feel, even if just for a moment, that he had won back what he once lost. The chaos and devastation caused early that morning was widespread and felt by everyone. Although Resorts World Manila is back, seemingly in full swing, the events that transpired that day have had a lasting impact, and the community will likely continue to feel the weight and impact of what happened for many years to come.